Hello and welcome to the Garden Hack Summit. Stacey Murphy here, known to many as Brooklyn's Backyard Farmer and also self-proclaimed garden geek. Thanks so much for joining me. You are the new homegrown revolution. And if you're anything like me, you enjoy spending time outside gardening, and sometimes it seems like a lot of work. So I put this summit together with some of my favorite visionary gardeners who are going to share hacks, tools, and gadgets that help to save time, energy, and resources. And of course, they make it seem like a whole lot less work and a whole lot more fun. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn these new gardening skills with me. And my intention is for you to be so inspired that you run outside and you have to plant something new. So it's time now to introduce my next guest to the summit. They call him the Duke of Permaculture. His name is Paul Wheaton. He is the creator of Permies.com, which is one of the best resources online, the largest resources online for permaculture information. He is the producer of the World Domination Gardening DVD series, which we'll talk about today. He is the host of his own podcast show, which is extremely informative and comes out regularly. You should check it out. And what I really enjoy about Paul and why I asked him to be on this summit is that he just has keen observation skills. He has a quick wit. He uses plain English to describe things, and he is so generous in making the world a better place. So thank you for joining me, Paul, and welcome to the summit.
Thank you, Stacey. Thanks for making me sound cool.
You are cool. I don't have to make you sound that way. So for listeners who don't know you very well, were you born this way? Were you born the Duke of Permaculture? How long have you been growing food? and why is this so important to you?
I was not born the Duke. The Duke is a bit of comedy that came from Jeff Lawton, and it was just a stupid, funny thing that an exchange that we had on one of my podcasts. And I said, when he said that I called him the Crown Prince, and he said, well, if I'm the Crown Prince, you're the Duke. And I said, oh, now I'm going to put that on all my stationery.
and it stuck.
And then it kind of went on. Sepp Holzer gave me this thing. I thought I'm just grooving on. I'm having a good time. But no, I definitely wasn't born that way. But I am freaky obsessed about gardening. And I wasn't always freaky. I used to be when I was young. When I lived with my granddad for a while, he's like sending me out in the garden to pull weeds. And I lived with my aunt and uncle, go out into the garden and pull weeds. And I didn't really care for it. But it was about 1995 or so that I decided to try my own garden. And almost everything died. And I was horrible at it. I was terrible. And then I got crazy obsessed, and I read 100 gardening books all in one summer. And then I had a really great garden, and then I got obsessed with okay, I think that I'm watering it too much. And so I wanted the garden to be resilient and grow without me irrigating it. And I could see that there are things growing in nature without irrigation. How dare they get away with that without, a gardener involved? How did they pull that off? How did all these plants come to be without having somebody water them all the time? And so I kind of got obsessed in that space. And so that's kind of where I've done a lot of work since then. And I think that's why you called me.
Yes, it is. And the title of this, we're talking about replacing irrigation with permaculture, and there might be some folks on the line who don't know what permaculture is. So I would love for you to share your definition of permaculture to get people on board.
So the one I've been going with for years now is permaculture is a more symbiotic relationship with nature so that I can be even lazier.
Aww.
Now, more recently, I've kind of come up with something that's longer and not as, poetic, but I kind of feel like you start off being obsessed about gardening, then you're obsessed about organic gardening, and then you're obsessed with having, you filled up your entire lot. You've got this urban lot, you can't squeeze another plant in there, you've gone as far as you can go. So then you get a bigger lot with deeper soil, more sun, you do it all over again. And then your obsession grows, and then you got an even bigger lot, and then you fill that space, and along the way, each iteration, you're starting off with even more techniques. And then I finally got to the point that I had purchased 80 acres, and then I was doing it there. And then somebody pointed out that the things I was doing, which was just basically being freaky obsessed with gardening, was permaculture. And so then I'm looking up all these books, and I'm going book. So anyway, now I've got 200 acres, and I, community. There's like more than a dozen people that live here, and we're all obsessed about permaculture, and I think that when you have a dozen people that are all obsessed about permaculture moving forward, then it's a whole different flavor of everything, and I'm in that group. So that is not as elegant of a what is permaculture thing, but it's really about being so obsessed about gardening that you're going to use gardening to grow a house. It's like, how do I garden myself some electricity? How do I garden myself a home? How do I garden myself some winter heat? That you're just that obsessed?
And also garden yourself a community. And what's cool is you're replicating nature in a way, the biodiversity of nature, you're replicating that, all these new viewpoints, all these new people involved, connections. It's beautiful. I'm hoping that a lot of people get a chance to visit you when they hear more opportunities to learn more about what you're doing.
We have hundreds of visitors every year, and this is the first year where we've formally set up something where people can come and stay in our little structures here.
Awesome.
So like the teepee with the rocket mass heater in it. We got 2 wafatis. We've got a cabin that's on skids that we built in a day. Lots of things. And of course, this is where the annual Rocket Mass Heater Innovators event happens. So of course, everything has a rocket mass heater.
Yeah. So we're going to come back around to that one. Let's talk some gardening first, and then let's come back around. Now we've whetted their appetite. They're like, what is that? But we'll come back. So, okay. So we started talking about watering and irrigation, and this is really one of the places that people really want to be a lazy gardener. They want to have all the fresh, delicious, organic produce, and it takes time to water, and it seems inefficient. And so this is one of the places where they're really trying to conserve. So what are some of the ways in which permaculture can eliminate irrigation altogether?
Okay, so I've come up with a list of about 20 things so far that I've been able to come up with myself. And I suspect that there's probably at least 100 different things on how you can replace irrigation with water. At the top of the list, everybody's favorite is hugelkultur. And that's where it's soil on wood. And if you make the pile, this is anecdotal evidence in general, you make the pile 6 or 7 feet tall, which I know immediately freaks out some people. But if you do, then on the 3rd year and beyond, you can grow your favorite garden plants without any irrigation. So that's the simplest one. But I mean, as I said, there's like a list of different things. And in permaculture, nature is sophisticated. There's so many different things that nature does all the time. And so within permaculture, it's like, okay, well, if I want to grow a tomato plant, the thing that most permaculture people, or most gardeners think about when you think of like, what's the premier garden plant? It's the tomato plant. Okay. And it's like, a lot of people don't know that a tomato plant is actually a desert plant. And it'll do fine in the desert with nobody around looking at it and checking in on it. However, if you plant a tomato plant and you do things to thwart its taproot, and I'm not sure if a tomato plant has a taproot, but I think it might.
Yeah, it does.
And it does. Okay, I didn't know that. It does have a taproot.
When I pull go ahead.
Anytime you transplant anything that has a taproot, it loses its taproot. It no longer has a taproot. And then I have gone to soil scientists, I've been to arborists, I've been to nurserymen, all kinds. I've presented this in all kinds of different places. And I put the challenge out there, and I say, I dare you to challenge me on that. Anybody, bring up your biggest expert and challenge me. I'll take it on. And then it's like, well, I have transplanted, and when I go to transplant, this is what I see. And I say, You don't see one taproot, do you? You usually see four. And those four not taproots, taproot-ishes, those four things that you see that look like a taproot, they're never going to go as deep as a taproot. They're going to go like maybe a quarter to a third the depth of what a taproot would do. So thus not a taproot. So that's one of the things is stop transplanting. Don't transplant. Plant from seed as nature designed. Plant from seed. Another big one is like Gabe Brown has an amazing video up on YouTube, and it's kind of like, and it's all about photographic evidence of the power of polyculture. And so it's like, here are 5 test plots, and the first 4 are monocrops of things that are soil building plants. And then this picture is taken in July. And so the first 4 plots are all dried and they look pretty dead. Things didn't go well. And the 5th plot is all 4 mixed together, and it's green and lush, doing great. And so each plants are designed to be in a polyculture to work together. And if you do that, then they can survive what we would call droughts, or they can get more water. And plants share their resources, especially in a fungal soil, which is something else we could talk about. But they share just with the plants that have the taproots and found more water down deep, or even found maybe just wet soil down deep that nothing else has gotten to. Whatever they found down there, they'll bring it up and share it with the other plants through their roots. And there's a variety of things that happen there. It's not just one thing. It's like there's a bunch of stuff that happens in there. And then even more, we focus so much on fertilizing plants, and we're only concerned about the elemental fertilization, like nitrogen. And it's like, well, actually, nitrogen comes in this massive buffet of forms. But really, what we should be focusing on is that if it's a polyculture, there are things being exchanged between the plants that we don't even know about yet. We haven't documented, we haven't proven it. But what we do see is that in polycultures, there's that exchange. And then part of the exchange, the exchange medium for the nutrients is water. And so if you plant things in a monoculture, which so many gardeners still do, they're going to plant in rows, or it's like, here's a big bunch of something. Here's a big bunch of carrots. Here's a big bunch of whatever. Then it's like still monocrops. Those carrots are all bunched together. Then the carrot goes into the soil saying, I need other things, and all I'm getting is the exudate of other carrots, which I have that already, and I don't want it. And so if you had 50 other plants around, including some trees and shrubs, then it's going to gather in lots of things that it wants and needs for a strong and healthy life. Things that we haven't written a white paper about yet. So, Ollie.
So you mentioned that hugelkultur is one of the best ways that we can reduce or eliminate our irrigation. And, I think there's people that are listening who know what hugelkultur is, and there are others who are like, all right, so I build up a bed with some wood in it. What does this mean? What is this? Can you give people the basics of hugelkultur?
It is basically just soil on wood, and I'd say that the thing that I suggest that people do is that you'll go out and you'll pick your spot. I'm going to build a hugelkultur bed right here. And then you lay down a layer of wood. And then you dig next to that, and you slap that on top of the wood. Now, where you're digging down is where your path is going to be. Mm-hmm. And then once you've hidden the wood, then you put down more wood. And then you put down more soil, and more wood, and more soil. Now the thing is that you dug down 3 feet deep, and then you put that on top of that pile, which is now 3 feet taller than it used to be. So the top of the pile went up 3 feet, and then your feet went down 3 feet, and the total difference is now 6 feet. It looks like a 6 foot tall pile now. Now, I would suggest going 7 feet, but hey, personal tastes and all that. And then basically you've built a hugelkultur. Now, now you can start planting it with all your favorite gardening plants. Now, the first year, it's going to be, it's going to be okay. It's going to be a little better than your typical garden. And then the wood's going to rot over the years. And then as the fall and winter and spring rains come, then that wood that's inside is going to get saturated. It's going to act like a big sponge. And it'll also be magnificent parking for all the nutrients. And then as it degrades and rots, it's going to get smaller, and it's going to leave behind little air pockets, which is one of the things that you really benefit from when you till, is you get all these air pockets, all this air in the soil. So you end up with all the benefits of till with all the benefits of no-till. I mean, with no-till, the thing you really want is to build your soil structure over the years, all your fungal networks and things like that over the years. And so you're going to not touch it. You're not going to till. You already dug this all up one time, as opposed to like all these people, they do a flat garden, and then they have to till it every year because they keep walking on it and stuff. And so now we've come up with something where it's like you don't have to till it anymore. You've also added texture to the landscape, which I think is really important. This means that the top of your hugelkultur bed is up higher than the ground that you're walking on. And so in Montana, when the frost moves through, then it's going to stick low to the ground and try to go downhill and away. So then what happens is that the stuff that's higher up on the bed tends to be able to make it through. If it's a frost-sensitive plant, it tends to make it through maybe a dozen frost events. And so you've added weeks, maybe even a month on either end of the season. So here in Montana, where a lot of us have a 3-month growing season, we now have a 5-month growing season. So
wow.
Anyway, I could go on for a couple of hours, but did I paint enough of a picture for you to get started?
Yeah, that helps. And I think it's helpful for people to hear that they're going to build this thing the first year, and the first year it may not retain as much water as the coming years. So, I could see somebody who's a beginner who builds this thing and says, man, I made all this work for myself and it didn't actually help me in eliminating my irrigation. But the trick is to be patient and to wait for that wood to start to rot, is what you're saying.
The third year and beyond is magic. You don't have to irrigate it at all. Now, of course, the other thing is that it helps to mulch it. And we're talking about putting some pretty steep sides on.
Right.
And so I want to, let's see, I'll get my hands up here. You want your sides to be about like this. Can you see my hands?
Really? That's steeper than 45.
About it's pretty steep, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then of course your dirty bits are going to want to go like this.
Right.
And you're going to say, no, dirt, stop that, back. And so, but once things start growing, it'll start holding it in place. Once it's riddled with all your growies, it'll be locked into that position. So you might need to then you're going to mulch these crazy steep sides, for which there is a way. Don't panic. We can do it. But we all know, as gardeners, mulch is awesome. Mulch can do just great stuff. So in fact, there are a lot of people that are getting by without any irrigation that are just doing the mulch dance. But I also think that they're in places where it's like, mulch gets you so far, but mulch usually doesn't get you all the way there. But hugelkultur will get you all the way there. Hugelkultur plus mulch is even better. So
something I heard from you just now that I haven't heard before is I always assume that the wood, that you put that in and then you put the soil on top and then some sort of layer to hold everything in. But you actually said it was even a little bit more like lasagna, like there you put some soil in, put more wood in, put more soil in. Is that what I heard you say?
Oh, okay. I want to talk about lasagna gardening for just a minute.
Awesome.
And I want to say no.
Okay.
I'm glad we had this chat. That lasagna gardening is like 5 times better than doing flat gardening.
Okay.
Just, what the traditional like rototiller game. So lasagna gardening 5 times better than that. And doing hugelkultur is 5 times better than lasagna gardening. So I'm glad we had this chat, got that all cleared up.
Yeah.
Now, it's so I'm trying to make a quickie recipe for you,
right.
Which does sound like layers, kind of like, and you're thinking, so a lot of people go to build hugelkultur and they're like, I'm going to do lasagna gardening and hugelkultur all at the same time. It's going to be awesome. And I'm here as the Duke to say, nuh-uh. And so what I want you to do is to do what I call not lasagna gardening. And I want you to, because it's all about, in permaculture, we're keen on diversity and edge. And I could talk for a couple of hours about that. But on the outside, we talk about polyculture. There's all kinds of plants growing in different places and stuff for all kinds of reasons. So I want to have diversity on the inside as well as the outside. So as you're building hugelkultur beds, you might have a spot that you've thrown in like a big gob of alfalfa hay, or maybe like as you're building your hugelkultur bed, you have a big bucket of kitchen scraps and you go blorp. Don't spread it out like a lasagna garden. No. Put it in a blorp in a spot. And then here's what's going to happen, because it's like, this is the difference between organic gardening and permaculture gardening. If you're going to do organic, like you might go out to a field. They're growing 40 acres of organic potatoes. And then they go out there and they find a Colorado potato beetle. They're going to destroy my crops. And so you go out there and it's like, what are you going to do? You're an organic person. So it's like, well, first of all, I want to get little tiny machine guns and kill all the Colorado potato beetles. And I'll use organic ammo. Yeah, it'll be Armory certified ammunition for my little machine guns. They want to kill the pest. But in permaculture, the Colorado potato beetle is an agent of nature, and we're trying to work with nature. So now that's true in that flat system with all those potatoes. Once Colorado potato beetles get started, or blight or anything, it could wipe out the entire crop. That's because the whole field is homogeneous. It's all the same. It all gets the same amount of sun, the same amount of heat, the same amount of pH, the same amount of pretty much everything. It's all the same. And then not to mention the fact that there's no polyculture, so the exudate is the same, and blah, 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 blah. But in a permaculture system, we've made everything really weird everywhere. So you got your hugelkultur beds running in all kinds of crazy directions and shapes and stuff. And then on the inside, there's all kinds of different stuff. And then you go and you plant a bunch of different things, including potatoes. And then a Colorado potato beetle shows up on a plant and starts munching on it. And then you think, well, I guess nature doesn't want that potato plant to be right there. But you look at your other potato plants and they're doing fine. And it's because they're finding all the stuff that they need and they're doing great right where they are, and they're going to thrive and be awesome there. But there's going to be some spots where there's potato plants where it's like, that wasn't the optimal conditions. Mother Nature is saying, don't worry, I'll take it out and we'll grow something else there. No big deal. That's the permaculture way. So instead of like freaking out and thinking about the little machine guns or all of the different organic techniques you're going to come up with to kill stuff, that instead it's going to be like, let Mother Nature do Mother Nature's thing. I'll have tons of potatoes and other stuff too. Ta-da! I can't remember if I'm answering a question or if I'm just babbling.
It's all relevant. It's all relevant. I think what's relevant here, so you're saying there's a lot of weirdness in this pile, and the sides are very steep. So now we've established it's wood rotting on the inside. There's soil on top. There's mulch on top. It's very diverse in there. So the question is, you're saying that the potato beetle found a potato somewhere that it wasn't the right place. So you've got all this surface area and up and down and maybe in other directions, I don't know, where to test and experiment with different plants. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about what plants you found go well in different areas of the hugelkultur bed, the top, the bottom, those sorts of things?
So I think one of the things that you alluded to just for a moment there is that have we doubled the amount of growies that we can grow? Mm. Because now we've got a lot more surface area for growing stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that, yes, we can now, in whatever spot we got, because that's the thing a gardener faces. It's like, I need to grow more things. and there's like, I'm all out of real estate. What do I do now? And it's like, so this is a thing you can do. And then on top of that, when you add texture to the landscape like this, then there's going to be some spots that are warmer and some spots that are colder. There's going to be, you're going to block a lot of the wind, which is very drying. And now you don't have to irrigate as much. And you're also wind also tends to be very cooling. And so when you're trying to extend your growing season, then it does a great job of keeping the whole area warmer all year long. And then at the same time, because some areas are facing away from the sun, those areas will be cooler. So it's kind of like, oh, I want to grow my lettuces and stuff in the middle of summer. And so where do I plant that? Well, you plant that generally on the sides that are more north facing, and you'll be able to grow those better in the summer. Yeah. There's a variety of techniques about adding texture to the landscape to generate cool spots in the summer. So, like, for example, I taught an earthworks workshop in San Diego, and this particular spot had a little bit of frost every year, just a little tiny touch of frost. They were a little bit inland from the ocean, and but at the same time, heat. Oh, it gets so hot there because they're kind of inland. They're a little deserty, and so we made spots that were going to be much warmer in the winter and much cooler in the summertime. But okay, you're asking about what to plant in different spots. And I got to tell you, universally, almost everybody who does hugelkultur, they plant sunchokes along the top. And sunchokes, not only and I don't know how many people are familiar with sunchokes, but they're kind of like, you eat the little tubers that grow in there. They're like potatoes almost. And they're the highest number of calories per acre, I believe, for any plant that I know about, highest calories per acre. So a lot of people will plant tons of them. And it's kind of like, it adds resilience to everything. They're perennial. So once they're there, they'll take care of themselves forever. They tolerate the most horrible conditions, like the top of a pile. Because now that's another thing with the hugelkultur. It's going to be dry up here, but you're going to get more moisture down towards the bottom. And so all of your stuff that's moisture loving, that tends to grow in swamps, like maybe onions, you'll plant those near the bottom. And then the stuff that's more resilient, will tolerate any kind of abuse, plant those more towards the top. And then, of course, do everything in between. Now, I still think, though, that you can plant a lot of stuff that likes water quite a lot fairly near the top. You'll be amazed at how well it does. And of course, you kind of got to send all your plants through boot camp, and that is a lot of people, when they water, then all of the plant's roots are like right next to the soil, and it's right next to where it gets the water. It won't shoot those roots down. Whereas if you withhold that water, then the plant will shoot its roots down into the woody bits of the hugelkultur bed and find all the water that it needs. Without giving it a bunch of irrigation and stuff. So that's something that a lot of us who are gardeners who love our plants have a hard time doing. When the plant starts to look a little water stressed, we're like, I'm going to bring the water. It's so thirsty. It's like, no, you got to be tough. You got to put it through that boot camp. Otherwise, it'll never learn to get its own water. You'll be its slave for all of its life, watering it every day. So, and then of course, one of the huge benefits is that it's like raspberries are such a fantastic example. If you grow a big bunch of raspberries somewhere and you never water it, and then you taste that raspberry, oh, it's amazing. And then you go over to this place where they've been irrigating it once a week, and you taste that raspberry, and it's like, oh, it's like water. Why does that have no flavor? So when you go down this road of replacing irrigation with permaculture, you generally get foods that have far more flavor and far more nutrient. Did I dodge all your questions effectively?
Awesome. I want to reiterate this idea about boot camp for your babies. This is such a fine line for people. You might even lose some plants, right? So you have these little baby plants, and they're searching for water. They start to look a little wilty. Your urge is to water them. And if you don't, the strong ones are going to survive, and the weak ones might die. And ultimately, you want the strong ones to survive is what you're going for. And then you plant something else in those spots where you have space, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go in early, and you're going to plant a lot of peas, and then maybe you go like right when they're trying to imbibe water for germination, or maybe they've already gotten to be this big and they need a little bit of water. Then it's kind of like, well, and then you go through 3 weeks without any rain, and there
Mm.
wasn't enough mulch or whatever. Then half of them die. The half of them are gone, and or the birds get them or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like not a big deal. I'm going to come back and I'm going to plant my summer stuff later anyway. I'm going to plant my sunflowers wherever they didn't make it. I'm going to plant a sunflower there.
Yeah.
Whatever is the thing that you want.
So I think it's really useful for people to know that that's the case. For people with a lot of space, then you have space to put something else in. For somebody who's got a really tiny space, they end up being a little bit more a slave to water because they want everything to live, right? It's just so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right where that plant died, they're going to erect a small tombstone. They're going to have a service, and they're going to weep a bit, and then they'll plant something.
Exactly. So hugelkultur is fairly new, I believe, and I'm curious, what are some of the big failures that have happened over the years as people have been experimenting with hugelkultur? Because I feel like failure is that moment of learning. It's maybe not defined as failure anymore.
Education through suffering.
Exactly.
And so I would say the thing that just drives me nuts, that I don't know how people, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a list showing up in my head. Okay, first thing, never ever use a wood chipper. Those things are loud, they stink. Doesn't it just seem like when people bring in a wood chipper in the name of gardening, that just feels like not gardening? It's like, feels more like gardening war. It's hostility to gardening. Here, I took this lovely stick that this tree made, and now I'm going to pulverize it and use its shredded bones as a mulch. And it's like, I just kind of feel like anywhere where you see a shredder, there's like, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. So inside of a hugelkultur bed, I think the thing to do is use as big a logs as you can, as big as sticks as you can. Everybody thinks when they build a hugelkultur bed, they're like, I'm gonna build the best hugelkultur that's ever been built. It's gonna be pretty. It's gonna have diversity on the inside. They've got this dream of all the things, and then you get to the site, and it's like, okay, you got like dirt that's like sand, and you got these old trees. Good luck. You don't have your best materials. You're going to use whatever you have. And so, all right, inside the hugelkultur bed, you've got these big logs and big sticks. Now, there is something called nitrogen immobilization.
How big?
Whatever you got!
Okay.
Not how big. Stop trying to make it smaller. Okay, I'm glad we had this chat.
Yeah.
Okay. There's such a thing as nitrogen immobilization. And what happens is that you've got nitrogen in your soil, and you've got this carbon. And the carbon is the big sticks and logs and stuff. And so where the nitrogen meets the carbon, the nitrogen gets tied up in kind of doing more of the composty thing and breaking stuff down rather than feeding your plants. And so if you use big logs, there's not a lot of surface area. A lot of the carbon is inside the log, and the nitrogen's not coming anywhere near that. But if you use wood chips, then you've got lots of carbon surface area, and so almost all of your nitrogen is locked up playing with the wood chips rather than feeding your plants. And that sounds less than optimal to me. And so stop using wood chips inside of your hugelkultur. The bigger the sticks, the better. And if you're going to mulch, you can mulch with sticks. You don't have to mulch with wood chips. You can have layers of sticks. You can mulch with rocks. It's not as good as sticks. Sticks aren't as good as organic hay. And of course, don't ever use non-organic hay, because that'll have persistent herbicides in it, which will just kill your growies. So, all right, that's problem number one. Stop using wood chips in your hugelkultur beds. That's bad. And don't import materials. Nearly anything you import is going to have a problem with it that you don't want in your garden. Now, granted, Ruth Stout, so amazing at all the stuff that she did, 80 years ago, when they didn't have persistent herbicides, that was a different story. Things are different now. Grow your own organic matter. Stop importing stuff. Now, there are exceptions, and it gets really complicated, and that's a 4-hour discussion in itself. But you're saying problems with hugelkultur. The next one is that I told you the one about the lasagna gardening. Don't try to mix those two. Hugelkultur without lasagna gardening is better than anything with lasagna gardening. All right, leaving that one behind. The next one is that some of our permaculture bigs love swales, and swales are awesome in tropical areas. And I'm in Montana, which is not a tropical area. And so swales, not such a good idea. Basically, anytime you build a swale, which a swale is going to be basically, it's a ditch that's built on contour. Usually they'll make them like 3 feet deep, maybe even like 5 or 6 feet deep. And so now the downhill side of the swale looks remarkably similar to a hugelkultur bed. And people get the idea of like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build hugelkultur beds on contour. And it's like, you can totally do that. Then it's like you've got swales and hugelkultur. It's better than either. 2 for 1. And it's like, no, you've made it worse. You've made a frost pocket. And so now what happens is the cold air comes down the hill and it pools up behind your hugelkultur bed like a swale, pooling up in a swale. That's why swales are not a good idea in cold climates. They like make frost pockets, which we don't want. We're trying to make sure, go ahead, make a frost pocket once in a while, set up a picnic table in it, so it's a really hot day. It's like, look, we're out in the sun, everybody's suffering, except us. We feel cool because we're sitting in a frost pocket. We're smart. So that's a great way to use a frost pocket in a place like Montana, but not for your horticultural endeavors. You might have like 1% of your land because you got 100 acres. Sure, I'll have one swale over here, and I'll grow my lettuces there. Yay! And so that's fine. But for the most part, no. Don't build your hugelkultur on contour. There's a list of other things, but those are probably the 2 biggest ones, the 3 biggest ones.
Okay, awesome. So I want you to think about for just a moment. So the average mom maybe who wants to build a garden in her yard, and she's thinking about saving time, and she's thinking about saving watering time specifically. What would you suggest hugelkultur for her and her family, and how would you prepare her for that process that is going to unfold in building that bed?
Okay, I would suggest it, but then again, I'm told that I'm of the permaculture bigs, I'm the most hugelkultur obsessed. It's like, my solution for almost everything is hugelkultur, but I think I actually have a lot larger repertoire than hugelkultur. It's just that hugelkultur is the easiest thing for people to wrap their heads around and start with. So I would recommend it. The big thing is if you're in an urban or suburban environment, then a lot of times people worry about what will the neighbors think. And I've got some opinions about what the neighbors think. But let's pretend for a moment that you want your neighbors to like you for mysterious reasons. And so you've elected to follow a path so that your neighbors will love you always and forever. And for some reason that matters. Okay, now it's like, okay, if you go out and you build like a 7-foot tall hugelkultur bed in your front yard, then old man Johnson across the street is going to like freak out. He's like, termites and rats and squirrels and I don't know what else. Things, looks like a construction site or something. All right, so he's going to find, I think the problem with really old man Johnson across the street is a lunatic, and that maybe that should be solved. That's the real problem. But, okay, we're going to run our lives based on this crazy old kook. So if you were to build something that is, say, 2 feet high, then it turns out Old Man Johnson merely gives you the stink eye. Give him some tomatoes and he'll probably shut up and leave you alone. Then each year, mysteriously, this gets a little bigger. Maybe it grows 8 inches every year. And then it's so slow that Mr. Johnson has appreciated the tomatoes and, doesn't seem to notice. We got away with it. Okay, so you were proposing like there is a mom, and is this good for her? And I think I just said, oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the trick is to try to get that wood in to get it higher, right? So do you have to take off the top layer to get wood in?
Well, didn't you mulch with wood last year?
All right.
And then you just kind of added a little top dressing of topsoil on top of that, maybe?
All right.
And then you needed to mulch again with wood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So, the hugelkultur beds, I know that in your world domination gardening videos, you actually go through and construct some of these beds for people. And so it's a great video series for people to see the process and get a visual of what it's going to be like. I'd love for you to share what benefits you've seen people have from watching those videos. Or what benefits you hope.
I had a lot of feedback from a lot of people where they've gone, because the thing is what I see too often is people get excited about planting things. It's like, I've now bought all these things, and I planted them, and I'm so excited, and now I want to change, add texture to my landscape. But if you do that now, you got to rip out all that stuff you planted, and so the thing is, and then you don't know. Usually, you don't know what you want to do as far as earthworks or building hugelkulturs or berms or ponds or swales or ditches or whatever. You don't know how to add texture to the landscape until after you've done a fair bit of gardening. And then you start getting all these ideas, and you're not sure if these are good ideas or bad ideas. So what I tried to do in the DVD series, which, by the way, started off as just a workshop. In fact, in San Diego, I think it was, I keep getting called down to San Diego. I don't know why, because I'm in Montana. But all right, people want me to teach stuff in San Diego. But we also reshot it here in Montana, and we did some follow-ups and things like that. But it gives people the courage to do their earthworks early. So that way they don't have to rip out the lovely things that they planted. And so we kind of show what you build and why and how. And we talk about how to make things warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. A lot. That's a big focus. So the feedback that I've had is that a lot of people have now added this texture to their landscape, which I think is huge. So many people, when they start talking about landscaping or about gardening or whatever they're going to do, they're just kind of like, well, it's flat. And so then that's what I work with is flat, and it'll always be flat. And the thing that I'm trying to advocate and demonstrate is the massive epic value that comes with adding so much, texture to the landscape to the tune of like your hugelkultur bed is 7 feet tall. And we also talk about the advantage, and there's been lots of experience we have with people building berms that are 15 feet tall.
Wow.
But of course, that's going to require a little bit more acreage. But if you're in an area that's really windy, I think a berm is your smartest thing. Not only do you get like double your acreage inside of whatever you got, but it really reduces that wind. And suddenly, where no one else can grow a garden without constant watering, which, by the way, when they go out and they run the sprinkler, it's like half the water just goes up into the air. And they're also in places where water is rather precious. Now you can grow a garden without irrigation and it'll seem like you've got gardening superpowers. Like you could have a garden cape, and want you to come to the master gardener groups to speak about all of your amazing superpowers.
Yeah, nobody's been dubbed the queen or the king yet of permaculture, so those jobs are still available.
Well, for your area, but it's like when it comes to being the king. I mean, Bill Mollison, of course, he'd be the king.
Yeah.
So, and then Sepp Holzer, we call him the Dalai Lama. And then of course Jeff Lawton would be the crown prince, because he's Bill's kind of made it clear that Jeff's his favorite.
Yeah. Well, so I have an unusual question for you, and this doesn't necessarily have to pertain to hugelkultur, but I would love to know, because basically how I see you is you are making permaculture less weird for people. They start to see it, they start to see that it works, and they start to get ideas of their own. And so I think that your voice is very powerful. So my question for you is, if you had a billboard somewhere and everyone would see it, what would you write?
Everyone would see it. All right, so it's got to be short, or else people won't read it.
Yep.
Oh wow. Oh geez, that's a tough one. That is an awesome question. I want to put pictures on the billboard of all kinds of fun things, but of course, you can't do a lot of stuff at once. I mean, that's kind of a problem with permaculture, is that it's so multifaceted, and then the other thing is I'm trying to leave room for the other, because like next to permaculture, there's a lot of people doing biodynamic, and they overlap a lot, but I don't want to say like beyond organic is permaculture, and it's like permaculture is so much more than just the gardening aspects, natural building.
That might be a great message for people to hear too.
Is how permaculture is made out of the beyond organic gardening, plus natural building, plus alternative energy, plus reducing toxicity. Maybe that's the thing to put on the billboard.
That's a long billboard.
I think the most profound stuff that we have in the world of permaculture is how we've found ways to have a more luxuriant life with less toxins. That seems to me to be fairly profound.
Yeah.
But I still kind of come back to the idea of it all starts with gardening. And then you get so obsessed about gardening, what happens when you get to the 12th level of obsession of gardening? And I think the stuff about less toxins in your life, as well as natural building, as well as all the alternative energy stuff, rocket mass heaters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's big. We got to figure out what that permaculture billboard's going to say.
Yeah, I think I've effectively dodged your question.
That's quite all right. It's a really tough question. But what I do want to share now, so we've talked a little bit about your World Domination DVD series, and I'd love for people to learn more about how they can get their hands on those. And also, you mentioned at the start that you're having people come visit and learn from you on site. And you also have other rocket mass heater DVDs. So I'd love for you to share where people can grab all those things and what they are. Yeah.
We're trying to make the homepage of Permies.com be a launching point for all the things. And so the forums at Permies.com are probably the most massive. And we get more than 1 million people each month not participating, but coming to the forums. We've got, I think, 200,000 people that have registered accounts and posted something. But we've got some very strict policies. Like on a lot of the internet, it's like there's some really negative, awful things, and I think we've got extremely strong moderation. And so we're very particular about what's allowed to be said. And so I think we've got a lot of gentle voices that are now coming up and saying things, whereas on the rest of the internet, they've learned don't say anything. The forums are probably the hugest thing. And almost everything we do is to direct people back to the forums. But as far as product, we've got the World Domination Gardening 3 DVD set, and we've got the Wood Burning Stoves 2.0 4 DVD set, which is mostly about rocket mass heaters. And then we've got the Permaculture playing cards, which it seems like everybody wants at Christmas time. And they're designed to, if somebody thinks that you're kind of nuts for liking permaculture, then you give them the gift of these cards, and then it's supposed to make you seem less crazy. So those are the three main products. And of course, people visiting here, I think we've got 7 different interesting things that people can stay in. In the wintertime, I'd say all year long, people want to stay in the teepee with the rocket mass heater in it. And the big thing that we did there is that we built a rocket mass heater in a teepee, and a couple stayed in it that winter, all winter long. And one night it got to 26 below.
Wow.
And they got up in the morning, and they didn't see, and the fire had been out for 8 hours. But that's what a rocket mass heater does. It heats up a mass, which just keeps pumping out that heat for days later. And so then they got up in the morning, and they didn't know it was so cold outside. But the fire had been out for 8 hours. And so then they took off their night clothes, they put on their day clothes, and then they stepped out of the teepee, and that's when it hit them. Oh, it's really bitter cold. 26 below. So they felt like, so it's like, what did it feel like when you were changing? They said it felt like it was maybe 50. And so there's a huge success. That's a big test that we did. Now people want to come, because the other thing, you come in the summertime, like now, when it gets to be hot out, and you stay in there, and you don't run a fire, then the mass is holding the cool, if you will. But anybody who understands physics will say, that's not how it works. It's like, well, I'm just going to pretend it is. It's holding the cool from the night before, and it's like, if you sit on the bench, it cools you, even though it might be 100 degrees outside. So, and then of course in the wintertime, you'll build a little bit of fire, and the heat will last for days. And you burn like hardly any wood. It's this little tiny speck of wood, and it's amazing how warm you will feel the next day when there is no fire.
It's amazing.
So people want to come and experience that. So we've got a lot of people with that. We're also building these things called wofadis, which are experimental. We're hoping to be able to capture the heat from the summer and carry it through a Montana winter. So people will be perfectly comfortable in a home without a rocket mass heater or anything else, or even passive solar. It'll be, we're just trying to test this annualized thermal inertia. Anyway, there's stuff like this going on all the time. We have, like I said, a dozen people here. There's constantly activities. So people come and they'll say, I want to learn more about working with green wood. I want to build something with green wood, or I want to carve something, or I want to, whatever it is that they want to experience. We've got a long, long list.
You make Montana sound exciting, even to a girl who hates the cold. I'm like, I want to experience that wofati and see how warm it actually is in there. And I have to say, I've given away 2 blocks of your permaculture cards. They're gorgeous. And my family sit and stare at each one of them and read them. They're very beautiful. And the other thing I want to share is what I looked at your forums, and there is a fabulous thread about hugelkultur in your forums. And there's a woman who was sharing all of her photos of exactly how she built one. So for people who are listening, check out permies.com and look into those threads. If you search for hugelkultur, there'll be lots more information there as well. It's an open source platform. People are sharing all their best tips and tricks. It's amazing.
I think we've got a whole forum dedicated to hugelkultur. I suspect that we have more than 1,000 photos of hugelkultur beds all over the world, and people share their success stories and stories of like, why did that happen?
Yeah, which is really valuable to learn from. And so thank you for bringing such a great resource into this world. It's very generous to have a place for all of that to live. And thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom here with us today. You've shared so many weird concepts for people, hugelkultur. Now they know about rocket mass heaters, and they've heard wofati. They're like, who is this guy? What is this stuff? So I think you've probably inspired lots of people to learn about new techniques. So thank you.
Well, thanks for letting me infect the brains of your peeps.
I know this is what it's all about. You want to infect everybody with permaculture, so that's what we're doing. And thanks to everybody who are listening in. You are the new homegrown revolution. We're planting food for a healthier planet.